How you doing?
How's everyone doing? How's
It's
your
nice
week
to
been?
have you here.
It's lovely to have you.
My hair is in that awkward stage between birth and death.
I'm right there with you, Marty. We've both had a kind of interesting...
It's Sunday afternoon. Why would one worry about hair?
No.
You just roll around on a Sunday.
Sometimes it's appropriate to worry. I feel like
That's all we
no
do.
one cares.
It's like,
no one cares.
It's 3:58 and we look at each other and go,
Oh.
oh.
What's wrong with us? It's winter.
Everything is
It's
wrong
winter.
with us.
It's winter.
It's winter.
It's fun.
It's Sunday. It's a nice. It's a good day. I hope for all of us out there in the world and in here in the gathering room.
Inside our little room.
And I had a really fun research week, and so I'm going to inflict it on all of us in the gathering room.
I love it when you inflict.
I want to inflict such research upon y'all.
Oh.
So,
You want me out?
maybe I should just go for it.
Go for it.
All right,
I'll be
Badger.
back later, kid.
Badger is going to forage and to get special questions from you, for us, for me, and us. Okay, so I'm almost finished with my book, which is based on Dante's Inferno. And one of the things that I'm reading about is that he gets at the end, to paradise. A lot of people have heard of Dante's Inferno. They haven't heard so much about his Purgatorio and Paradiso, because especially in the Paradiso, nothing really happens. Literally, things seem to happen. He seems to travel through heaven and wonderful people meet him, and it's like this fabulous meet and greet. But he is told that actually none of it's really happening, that he's actually not going anywhere, that everything is one thing, that everybody he's meeting is one thing, that he is one thing, and the one thing is him. And so it's interesting how, I don't read Italian, but I've read so many commentaries and gone through the text so many times that I can see how he actually made his language circular, so that a lot of people talk about the Inferno has this nice plot line, right? Like a movie. Bad shit happens. Bad stuff happens in the Inferno. And then he gets to the Paradiso and he's like, it's kind of like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. He's like, oh, pretty music, beautiful lights. I'm going to faint. Then he wakes up and he can tolerate more beautiful music and lights. So he sees even more beautiful music and light and he faints. I mean, it's really weird. But it's so full of what happens to us when we stop looking at all the travails we experience as being the dominant factor in our lives, and we come into a view of the world that is free from error. It isn't like crammed full of religious principles. It's just free from error. And what's interesting is that, of course, Dante was writing in 14th century Italy, and the Catholic Church was the dominant theology, but a lot of what he says sounds more like an enlightened Asian mystic than it does like a medieval Catholic. So I think he had a real enlightenment experience. And I've been talking to brain researchers about how we can go through similar experiences ourselves. And I've known people, you read mystical texts other than Dante that say people almost routinely, if they focus hard on truth, seekers of truth tend to get to this place that is not a place, where everything is one, and the one is them, and everything is love, and everything is beauty, and the light and music of it are almost overwhelming. And Ro just came and moved the camera. I can only assume because of commentary. Anyway, today I was talking, this week I was talking to a fabulous researcher at Stanford, whom I will not name because I didn't ask her if I could publicly name her, but she was wonderful. And she and her colleagues there have been doing research on something, including, but not limited to, something called primal world belief. I had never heard this phrase. I went scuttling over to the internet and I read a new study that's come out from a collaboration of some of the most famous psychologists working today. And what they did they were looking at things like depression, how we can experience happiness, how we fall away from happiness, how people who've been traumatized can come to see the world as safe, and so on. And what they found was that a lot of work's been done on the way people see themselves, but there's not as much work on how people see the world or reality. And so they undertook to study the way people see the world based on something really ingenious. They used the internet, they used Twitter, and they looked at how people show up on Twitter, and they looked at millions and millions and millions of tweets. So the size of the sample is massive compared to psychological studies that were done, say, 25, 50 years ago. You know, you get 50 college students in a room and call it a big study. This has millions. It's inconceivable how big it is. And what they found was that when it comes to the way people see the world, there are these overarching world beliefs, and they're very deep in the psyche, but they're not unalterable. And what they found, if you look at the positive way people view the world, there's kind of a division between people who believe that the world is safe, enticing, and alive versus people who don't see it that way. And I love that, safe, enticing, and alive, because when Dante gets to paradise, he says that everything is the great sea of being, S-E-A, like the great ocean of being. And safe, enticing, and alive, the acronym for that is C, like an ocean. And then, because I love acronyms, in fact, one of my favorite things is what I call creation of memorable acronyms. The acronym for that is COMA. And that's one of my favorite things to do. So if I thought about the opposite of safe, enticing, and alive, and I came up with dangerous, uninteresting, and inert, DUI, which of course is what we also use to describe driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. The reason I like this acronym is that I believe in our culture, because we're very mechanistic and materialistic, and the party line is that we are physical beings, and sometimes we may have spiritual experiences, but they're not real. And that view is seen as sane. If that's what we are, if we just blindly emerged out of matter and consciousness is nothing but an accident of biochemistry and we're all going to die, then the world is definitively dangerous, uninteresting, or unresponsive to us, and inert. It's stuff. But if you flip that and you see us as spiritual beings having a physical experience, then nothing can endanger us. Death is not something to be afraid of. There is nothing dangerous if we are in our essence spiritual, just having a physical experience. And everything then, once it's safe, becomes mysterious and enticing. And when that happens, and I've experienced this, when you start to feel safe and you start to feel curious about the world, it shows itself to you as alive. I've just been writing about the thing. I know I told you guys about this, but I was in Sedona interviewing Anita Morjani, fabulous writer who had this extended near-death experience, died of cancer, was sent back to life, and 9 days later was cancer-free after being riddled with tumors. Anyway, while I was there, I thought I'd really love to see a javelina. These little desert, they look like pigs. They're actually peccaries, but I've always loved seeing them off in the distance when I was living in the desert. But I thought I really want to see a javelina. But Ro and I arrived in Sedona late at night, and then we got up the next morning, and I had to be in this interview right away. And while I was interviewing Anita Morjani, there was a knock at the door, and a camera assistant went to open it, and there was nobody there except a beautiful male javelina. And she went, whoa! And we all ran over there, and we ended up going outside, and 20 or 30 javelinas came up and just kind of hung out with us and ate cactus and nursed their babies. And it was like, I've seen javelinas before, but they've never acted like that. And even if at that place they've gotten used to humans, why did they knock on the door? So this is just one example of how, after I started seeing the world as safe, enticing, and alive, things started to come to me as if they were interacting with me the way paradise does for Dante. And what I learned this week is that interventions like Byron Katie's work, where she goes in and questions any belief that causes suffering until it dissolves, that has now been shown by research to have the capacity to take someone whose worldview is dangerous, unresponsive, and inert, and change their primal world belief so that they see the world as safe, enticing, and alive. That happens. They did this study with people who were going into Byron Katie's 9-day school, where you learn to question your thoughts, and that's all you learn. They come out 9 days later, and their worldview has flipped from dull, dangerous, unresponsive, and inert to safe, enticing, and alive. And it stays that way for months afterward. And they've only done the research recently, so we haven't seen a long term, but they've followed them longitudinally for as long as they could, and the result is permanent. So a lot of times on this very gathering room, we get lots of input from people who've had considerable trauma. I have too. I mean, part of my life really sucked, especially when I was very young. And then again, when I was growing up. Not as badly as some of the things. I mean, many people have had worse trauma than I've had, but I've had a fair amount. And I really saw the world as I was under DUI. I was driving under the influence of suffering. And by aggressively questioning the thoughts that made me fear the world, I started to realize that none of them rang the sense of truth inside me as much as alternative beliefs that said I was a spiritual being exploring a physical reality where nothing can really hurt us, where everything loves us, and where the adventure is to go from driving under the influence of suffering to swimming in the sea of being, where everything's safe, enticing, and alive. I'm putting that out there, and I'm expecting a lot of questions about it. And the methodologies for getting there are very different. There are a lot of ways you can go about flipping your primal world beliefs. But what I wanted to tell you today is that research has shown that there are these two distinct states of mind, and that you can exchange one for the other, and that if you do that, whether it's through therapy or the Byron Katie work or meditation or whatever it is, ever after that, just like Dante in Paradise, the world will be in love with you and you with the world. That's what I came to tell you. Now I want to take questions, because I'm sure there will be a lot of you who have them. Like, that sounds nice, Martha Beck. How do you do it? That's what I want to talk about.
I'm back.
Hello, Badger.
Hi there.
Notorious Badger.
Here I am, notorious, and here, both at once. No flies on me. Okay, so the first thing that has come up is, could you say a bit more about spiritual beings having a human experience?
Yes. I think if you've ever had the biggest traumas that most people experience in their lives are about the transition between alive and not alive. That is what happens at birth and what happens at death. At those points, what happens surrounding birth and what happens surrounding death, they're both very deep, and they're both very riddled with the propensity for trauma. So one of my biggest traumas was when my son was diagnosed with Down syndrome, and it was bringing someone into the world that might die immediately. They told me there was a 60% chance he would die when he was born. I was confronted with making the choice whether to facilitate his passing or not prior to his birth. And then I was told that he would ruin my life. And I had to make a decision then whether to bring into life a physical being that was destined to suffer. And the myth I believed was that if somebody doesn't have Down syndrome, they can escape suffering. But if they do have Down syndrome, they're going to suffer. So why not? Why put them through this? And when you're in the margins, and there were things also that happened to me that surrounded the death of people I love that were equally powerful, but I'm going to just focus on this one for a minute because it really made the question very clear in my mind. What is human life? How and under what conditions is it worth having? And because since the beginning of that pregnancy, I had had psychic experiences where I could see things that were happening to people who weren't around me, and I had precognitive knowledge of things that were later proven to be true. I was just able to say, I'm going to play with the idea that I'm not bringing in a defective creature to suffer and die. I am bringing in the vehicle for a spirit that is already interacting with my spirit. And I'm going to, in order to justify that choice, I really went hard into the idea that we are spirits riding these bodies rather than bodies that, flicker out and, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death.
She starts on the Shakespeare, you guys. We to get comfortable.
Life is a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury signifying nothing. All that stuff of, Macbeth, when he gets to murdering someone, is like, who cares? It's all meaningless. I went completely away from that point of view and into the idea that this little critter that was coming into my life was in fact the vehicle for a mighty spirit. And I have felt it ever since. I feel him in the house right now.
That being destined to suffer is singing pop songs at the top of his voice right now that I don't know if you guys can hear.
Yeah, you can hear him like blaring away. And he sings the funniest things, like when he was like 12, and I didn't know if he was even able to understand much language. I still don't know. He doesn't use much language, but he somehow managed to figure out how to go online and download a ringtone. This was quite a while ago. It wasn't that easy. I didn't know how to put a ringtone on my cell phone, but he put a song on his phone so that when you called him, you heard this little Disney song, be true to yourself, and you'll be magic. And then much later, I would hear him bellowing songs in his room, and he sent me a song called Great Light of the World. And he was in there singing this song that goes, oh, great light of the world, fill up my soul. It makes me kind of...
Yeah, you have never told that without crying.
It's a good song. Bebo Norman, I think. Oh, go look it up. Oh, great light of the world, fill up my soul. So this, I think I've had a piggyback ride on a gigantic spirit that came in with my son. And then when people I love have died, when my father died, instead of feeling like I'd lost him, I actually found him. I woke up at the moment he died, and we'd been estranged for 20 years, but I felt this flood of his spirit in that room that was so beautiful and so in love with reality, like free. And it was intense, and I had no idea he died until later that day. I know I need to wrap this up. We're always kind of doing this because I keep going. If you take me down this road, I just start to go into the sea of being and lose the linear thread, because I'm just standing around like Dante going, oh my God,
You're about to faint.
Oh my God, I can't handle this. It's too beautiful. I'm going to faint. So that's my answer to that question. And it only went on for 20 minutes.
I thought it was great. I love it.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Lots of other people chiming in. I like this. Lara says, I find the world enticing and alive, and also people hurt each other, and it scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. And that's the reason that people don't just stumble into the great sea of the primal world belief that things are safe, enticing, and alive. You actually have to grab the steering wheel at a certain point, because things happen every day that are terrifying, and they're presented in ways that are terrifying, and the culture frames them in ways that are terrifying. Australia just burned down. That's terrifying. Climate change is real. That's terrifying. Politics today, war, they're all terrifying. To the normal acculturated brain that we get from growing up at this particular time and place. And in order to not suffer, we have to go in and aggressively question the idea that these things are really the ultimate truth. And that's why the researchers found that people who went through Byron Katie school flipped from driving under the influence to being in the great sea of being, because they aggressively did one thing over and over and over, and it's just one thing. They asked, is it true? Is it true? Can I absolutely know that this thought that frightens me or upsets me is true? Can I absolutely know that it's true? What does it do to me? Who would I be without it? Is it true? It's nothing but a search for truth. There's no dogma, there's no gospel to be preached, there are no rules you have to follow. It's just, is it true? Is it true? Is it true? And if you will not let go of that question, the DUI reality breaks, and the safe, enticing, and alive world comes and gets you. And now we know, research-based, it happens methodically, routinely, to people who pursue truth hard enough. And suffering is a great motivation to do that. Yeah.
Oh, this is perfect, because Corian says, how do I reprogram myself to the C lifestyle?
Yeah, it's just every time you feel like the world is dangerous, uninspiring, uninviting, and inert, say, why do I feel so bad? Why does it look so bad? Why are things bothering me? It will always end up being a belief about the world and how bad things are going to happen, and they are happening. And if you find the belief that hurts the most and you put it under a microscope and you say, is it true? Can I be absolutely certain that it's true? Are there any alternatives that may be truer? What is the effect on me? Does it make me sick or does it make me well? Does it bind me up or does it set me free? Who am I without it? Is it true? That capacity of the human intellect to slice through error, if we use the mind that way, it sets us free. But most of us use the mind to tell the same stories as the culture. Oh, everything's awful and bad things have happened and bad things are going to happen and then you die, and oh, that's our cultural mindset. And we can set our mind to that task and it will do it admirably. Or we can say, I'd rather use my mind to try to cut through illusion. I'd rather use my mind to get out of errors. I'd rather use my mind to try to be happy. And you don't go memorizing a set of illusions. You drop beliefs and the world comes to you as safe, enticing, and alive. And then you start, it's like a self-reinforcing cycle. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. It gains momentum, it gains speed, it becomes overwhelming if you persist. Yeah.
So even though you have already answered this, I do want to bring Laurel's question in, because this stuff is, if you're not familiar with Byron Katie's work, this is what she's saying is really, really hard to get your mind around.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I want to use Laurel as an example of how things can be illusions, even though they appear to be totally true. So what she says is there another primal view? Is there a view that embraces the middle, somewhere in between? Our physical world is not always safe, she says. How does that fit within C? So I just wanted you to kind of play with that.
But when you say the physical world is not always safe, you're basing that on a huge pyramid of cultural understanding where safe is defined as nobody getting physically hurt, nobody getting emotionally hurt, nobody dying, and so on. It's not, the world is dangerous from that perspective. The only thing I'm questioning is this very, very deeply entrenched cultural belief that what we are is physical beings and that there is no broader context. And it is very mind-blowing to start to believe maybe I'm not just this body. Maybe you're not just that body. Maybe, you know, I was thinking one day how funny that this body had 3 children. And then I thought it didn't. Each of our atoms is replaced at least once every 7 years. Nothing here in my body was present when my children were born. This physical thing is just a clump of atoms that keep forming themselves around a wisp of consciousness, what am I really then? This body, which definitely will die and is always in danger, or the consciousness that's causing matter to clump around it, and which no one knows what happens when it dies. Like freeing ourselves from pure materialism is sort of step one. And the irony is that since the early 20th century, physicists have known that physical reality is not the way it appears to us, and that what's really there is wave energy that we perceive as matter. So if you start to look deeply into it scientifically, the idea that we're purely physical dissolves. And if you look into it deeply with your self-observation, that idea dissolves. And if you start looking for experiences that can teach you that the world is bigger and wilder and more magical than our culture teaches you, you start to be able to perceive things that have been going on all along that don't fit into that model of us as just physical beings at risk every moment and always doomed to die. You just have to put a different lens on. And it's like we're wearing this set of cultural sunglasses and going around saying, wow, everything's purple because the glasses are purple. And just indubitably, everything's purple. I see it that way. Put on a different set of glasses and everything changes. The way the world appears to us is fundamentally colored by the way we see it, by the beliefs with which we look out upon it. And when we question those beliefs, the things that we thought were indubitable because everyone in the culture agrees on them turn out
to be dubitable.
They're dubitable.
They're dubitable.
They are eminently dubitable.
I have a great when you're done, a great.
No, I'm done. I better be done. I get very, very exercised on this. It's like, I have 2 minutes. I have to convince them they're not physical. Ah!
All right, this is where we're going to end because this is perfect. So Di says, if we can flip our viewpoint from DUI to C, and it keeps as C for a period, it seems to be receptive to switching back and forth. And I thought that was a great point.
Yeah, that's true.
That's probably, you're not going to
when you have a bad day, when you are, I talked to a shaman once who's, he saw the world as just this projection of consciousness that was completely full of beauty. And because all spiritual traditions take us there, whether it's major world religion or some small rainforest tribe, whatever, they all go to the same place. But he said, when your energy is low, when you're tired, when you're hungry, when you've been disappointed, you're very vulnerable to thinking of the world as dangerous, uninviting, and inert. I can't remember that second thing, but the first one.
You're saying uninteresting, right?
It's uninviting, it's uninspiring, it's unresponsive, it's everything. It's just
Great big pile of
It's just a pile of underwear. The world is full of underwear. Full stop.
Martha Beck out.
Bam! No, but he said, when you have these experiences, of course you're going to fall off the wagon. Of course you're going to tumble into different ways of seeing things. But you will recognize that the ways of seeing the world that make it seem dead can't sustain you. They are not food for your true spirit. And we know because they cause suffering. They cause depression. That's what this huge study was looking at, was depression. And what they found was that people whose worldview changes to seeing things as safe, enticing, and alive, not only see the evidence of their beliefs around them, but their depression goes to zero. And that happened to the subjects that we're looking at who had gone through just 9 days of training in the Byron Katie method, which is only one method. So there are ways to put on a different set of spectacles. There are ways to get out of Dante's Inferno and find yourself in a sea of being where everything is connected to you, everything loves you, everything is safe, enticing, and alive. See it because you believe it. And then you won't be depressed anymore. So I'll talk a lot more. I mean, this is what we're always talking about, right? But I was just very excited to see this massive new study, and I hope you go check it out. And
how do they do that?
Just look, if you just Google primal world belief, you'll see the study. So it's all very exciting.
It is.
And it's very doable. And there are numberless ways to get to it. Every spiritual tradition on earth gets to it.
There you go.
It's all around us. So have fun swimming the sea of being for the next week, you guys. Love you so much.
Love you.
Thank you for
Gather with
coming
us.
and gathering with us. Bye.